Hi, this is Cheryl Gallant, your Conservative Member of Parliament for the Starlink sighting riding of Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. Parliament is not sitting this week, but our work continues. Tune in later to catch another riveting episode of Fun with Filibusters at Defense Committee. You don't have to worry about when you'll have time to grab a snack because the chair will call several lengthy suspensions while she gets her act together. But first, the new developments. Last week, a judge ruled against the CBC in its lawsuit against the Conservative Party. If you had not heard, during the last federal election, the Liberals launched an unprecedented attack on the Conservative Party. Sorry, I misspoke. During the last federal election, the CBC launched an unprecedented attack on the Conservative Party. The CBC wrote 5 letters to the Conservatives demanding ads containing short CBC clips be taken down or else the CBC would sue. Well, the party took down the ads and then the CBC launched a lawsuit anyhow. The CBC claimed they had to do this to protect their reputation for impartial independence. Only the CBC could think that suing one political party during an election would prove they were impartial. Never mind this whole idea of going after Conservatives for short clips of CBC was first proposed by then Liberal leader Stéphane Dion. Dion really didn't like it when we replayed clips of him speaking. One of the clips the media wing of the Liberal Party wanted to censor was Trudeau telling a veteran they were asking for more than he could give. So, we have the taxpayer-funded CBC suing a political party at the behest of the Liberal Party, and the CBC thinks this shows Canadians they're nonpartisan. If the logic behind CBC's goal is this bad, how good could their legal case be? Based on the judge's decision, the answer is not very good at all. The judge confirmed what every independent expert and credible lawyer had said when the lawsuit was launched during the election. The CBC had no case. To be clear, this was not just some legal dispute where you get 50 lawyers giving you 50 answers and nobody really knows until the judge rules. The CBC executives were not given bad legal advice. They willfully disregarded the advice, and not just the advice of their own lawyers and experts. They ignored advice from Elections Canada. Elections Canada actually released special guidelines for Canadian broadcasters, and the advice is clear. Quote, however, during the election period, they're not entitled to decline an ad unless the broadcast would be in contravention of the law. If a news clip is relatively short and is not a substantial part of the audio-visual work from which it was taken, the broadcast of a news clip in a political ad would not infringe the copyright of the owner of the audio-visual work and would not require the permission of that owner to be broadcast. End of quote. So the CBC blatantly ignored the advice from Elections Canada. They disregarded it. They dismissed it. They acted like they were special and like the rules don't apply because they're the CBC. Just one problem. The reason every politician and every party accept and follow the Elections Canada advice is because Elections Canada enforces the Elections Act. If Elections Canada tells you not to do something because it would break the law if you did it, you should listen to them. The CBC ignored the advice of Elections Canada. The CBC ignored the advice and went ahead and blocked an election ad from being aired. The issue for CBC is Section 3 25 of the Canada Elections Act clearly states that it's against the law. Quote, "No person shall prevent or impair the transmission to the public of an election advertising message without the consent of a person with authority to authorize its transmission." End of quote. Using the threat of groundless lawsuits, the CBC successfully prevented the transmission to the public of the elections ads. Elections Canada is currently investigating Ezra Levant for publishing a book critical of Trudeau during the election. Elections Canada investigators are taking a somewhat liberal or broad interpretation of the law in order to pursue Ezra. None of the authors in the books in support of Trudeau are being investigated, though. Now we have a clear-cut case of the CBC breaking elections law. This must be investigated. Please go to cherylgallant.com/CBC. Co-sign my letter to the Elections Canada Commissioner calling for an investigation into the CBC. Nearly 1,000 Canadians have already co-signed the letter despite the total media blackout on the issue. The CBC has always had an anti-conservative bias, but this time they took it too far. This time they broke the law, and it's time they're held accountable. While the United States and Britain are reopening, in Canadian provinces, they're being forced to extend lockdowns. The United States achieved this miracle through Operation Warp Speed. Operation Warp Speed paid for the mass production of vaccines prior to clinical trials. The usual method is for clinical trials to be completed before going into full-scale production. No company could afford to mass produce vaccines which might not work out. It was a gamble, but it was a good one. 2 of the original companies in Operation Warp Speed were unable to produce an effective vaccine, while the other 4 were successful. Operation Warp Speed will be remembered as another American success story, just like the moon landing. While the United States was traveling light years ahead of Canada, the Trudeau Liberals were betting everything on a single vaccine from a single company based in China. The United States got Operation Warp Speed. We got Operation Panda Depress. To this very day, we still don't know the real story. Why did Trudeau place the lives of our citizens with the country holding 2 Canadians hostage? If the communists controlling China will hold Canadians hostage to get what they want from us, why wouldn't they hold a life-saving vaccine hostage too? Well, we'll never know the true origins of SARS-CoV-2. The communists controlling China made sure of that. Maybe it jumped species. Maybe it was accidentally released from a lab. We just can't know. But what we do know with absolute certainty is that the communists controlling China are responsible for the global pandemic. They lied and they denied for 2 months until the virus had spread to every corner of the globe. We'd all learned this by March of last year, yet somehow by April, Trudeau said, "Let's make a deal." Even before the ink had dried on Trudeau's bad deal with China, the government had learned they would not be getting any vaccines. They covered up that information for 4 months. They only announced the deal had fallen through after they had gotten in line behind Europe to order vaccines from Western-based companies. Behind on vaccines, Trudeau panicked and placed massive overorders. As with Operation Warp Speed, The government tried to hedge its bets by ordering millions of doses from 7 different companies. He tried to pretend this was the same as Operation Warp Speed. The difference was the pre-production. The United States pre-produced while Trudeau just prepaid. Our vaccines are still being produced. It didn't have to be a 1-dose summer as Trudeau has started to brag. It should have been a 2-dose spring. The worst part of this whole failed China deal is we still don't know why. Had this happened in the United States, the New York Times and the Washington Post would be fighting tooth and nail to get the real story. Instead, we get our national newspapers and broadcasters begging Trudeau for cash. Well, that's all the time we have now. Tune in at 2:30 right here on my Facebook page to watch the Defense Committee. Live from Ottawa, this is Cheryl Gallant, wishing you a good night.